Day 3. Polar bears here.
We just bought this plane, whatever it was, 6 weeks ago in Mojave, and now here it is in the jungle.
The first day of shooting was actually me. I think it was supposed to be Evangeline at one point. The work papers for Evangeline hadn't come through, and mine fortunately had, so the first day shooting was Charlie on the plane being chased by the air stewardesses into the men's room and doing drugs.
The rewriting continues, as it will until Day 32.
1, 2, 3, back! That was good. That was great.
Shooting the sequence on the plane, the interior set, which was the only true interior we had in the entire pilot, the sequence required this plane to drop, you know, hundreds of feet and crash, and it was a plane that existed on the stage floor. There was no gimbal, no movement to the plane. To figure out how to make this whole sequence look realistic, we had really wonderful and cooperative background actors, the extras in the scene, who would, on cue, move accordingly in the old kind of Star Trek model, where, you know, you'd move the camera in one direction, people move the other direction. We did a lot of that.
The good thing was we used Steadicam almost exclusively through that part. So instead of just a shake, it was kind of this kind of organic thing like an airplane would do.
Greg Lunsgaard, who was the Steadicam operator, was acting as much as any actor. I mean, he was performing that camera. Every move that that airplane makes inside the fuselage was performed by Greg. Then we're gonna come down, and we're gonna sequence. And he was wonderfully collaborative. I love those like little jitters that happen, not the kind of big shakes so much. So he would let me like hold on to the film magazine and shake the magazine to get that kind of little look. Masks!
I had those handcuffs on, and I'm reaching and stretching for the oxygen masks, and for me, it's all about throwing myself into it physically, and I'm not using tools, I'm just using my imagination. So I am like reefing on these cuffs. By the end of the day, my wrists were raw from those cuffs because, of course, it's not only the 5 minutes you see on screen, it's all day of, you know, different takes, different sizes, different angles.
These are the hands that wrestled with metal all day. And they have the scars to show it. My wrists are like twice the size they normally are.
So there's this guy off camera, and he's got this anchor case. It's about this big, and it's trimmed in chrome. And it was a fake one. It was foam rubber, hard foam rubber. For 15 or 20 takes, he was just like bouncing it off my head. And they had these tubes sticking out of my head, and every time they would bounce it off my head, all this blood would spurt out.
Hey, speed on beat. 3, 2, 1, go.
We knew we wanted to do the back of the plane getting ripped away. We devised this shot with Kate in the foreground where the rear of the plane gets ripped away, where we would replace a good third of the plane with a computer-generated plane. And we had stuntmen and women rigged on wires and getting yanked out and yanked back. We had these giant Ritter fans. The whole thing is an illusion. Nothing's moving. And with the use of the special effects and the visual effects and the actors and cameramen, we were able to really pull it off.
Ae mai ano I tō tuahu, e ata vai la, e vai e ola no e.
We have a special guest today. Greg Grumberg, a.k.a. Sean from Felicity, Weiss from Alias, and Cause from The Catch will be playing our pilot.
You know, me being a real manly man, tough actor that I am, they got me in a bunch of this makeup, and they're about to yank me out of the plane, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to have Jake do it. There's my twin. There's Jake.
Fine landing you had here, Captain.
What happened was, I ordered a Mai Tai, and they made it a little stronger than they usually do. And we were cruising, and I was looking out the side of it. And, you know, things happen. This tree should not be where it is.
I love that location where the cockpit was against the tree. When I first walked into the cockpit and sort of started climbing up, I actually got nauseous. I got really severely nauseous. And it was because I looked at what I knew should be level, and it was so askew that it made me sick. And not only that, it smelled horrible in there.
The mud in the jungle is very smelly. It's rotted, so it's this incredible smell of decay that followed us everywhere. It was in all the trucks, on our boots, on our clothes.
I sort of like the idea that when you guys first ran from that cockpit, you were too afraid to think.
And also putting your hood up ruins your peripheral vision, which is scary.
That's true. But the one thing I was going to say is when you show up and scare her, by mistake, if you're hooded, it's one more thing of like, no, you know what I'm saying? It's one more piece of like, ah.
Never been to Hawaii, but obviously was very interested in a few big elements of Hawaii. First of all, being the surfing that, you know, I learned to do in New Zealand about 7 years ago. So I was very keen to come to, you know, what is now kind of the mecca of world surfing. And also just the wildlife, you know. I'm a big fan of trees and of nature and lizards and bugs and stuff like that. This is a katydid. It's called a katydid because it makes a noise that goes katydid. It's a type of bush cricket.
Had nothing but intense rain for like a week for the first week of shooting, so it's been pretty intense.
It rained for 12 days. And I don't think I've ever shot anywhere where it's rained for 12 days. But fortunately, it was part of our story, so that was fine. We were making rain, it was standing in the rain. And we even got flash flooded once out of the jungle set.
When we got to Heiakea, which is the cockpit sequence where they find the pilot, there was a flash flood which came down the hill. There were literally camera cases floating away.
The lights got thrown in, with the ballast, got thrown into a container. The guys just ran and they got it into a container, and the container had flooded during the storm, as the storm had continued. So when we got there in the morning, not knowing whether we'd be able to shoot, the gaffer and the electricians were pulling out the lights and looking at the sodden ballast and going, oh. And the gaffer goes, you know, if we were like in Minnesota, we could use those big heaters that they use to keep the football players warm. And then he goes, you know, like they're like dryers. And he goes, hair dryers. And actually Kevin Blank was standing near to me, and I said, Kevin, do you have a credit card on you? And he goes, yes. I said, get in a truck, get in that van over there, tell them to take you to Long's and buy as many hair dryers as you can find. So he rushed off, and he came back, and they put the dryers on the C-stands, and they dried out the ballast, and it worked. So we were shooting within 2 hours.
We all had boots on up to our knees. The water and the mud were over the boots, getting into your boots, sloshing around, but we kept shooting. And we were making rain at the same time because it would get lighter and we needed the same consistency. So even though it could be raining, we had the fire hoses and the rain towers going at the same time.
It does rain a lot in Hawaii over the winter, and I think it's wonderful for our show. The truth is that anytime we do those big sort of jungle rain sequences, which we've done a lot of them, and I've done a lot of them, they're brutal to do. They're brutal for the crew. They're really difficult for the actors. I mean, they're cold, they're muddy, they're, you know, because we're not just using obviously natural rain. They're fire hosing us and stuff, but they really look good. They look amazing.
It's always hard to bring lights into a remote place like a jungle, and whatever lights we could drag into the jungle we used for fill. But we used a lot of existing ambience, even though there's so little because of the weather. I think we used the fastest film and the fastest lenses, and still barely had enough light to shoot there, even in the daytime.
We did this shot of them running, the three of them, and it would have been funny because they weren't running, they were just standing in place, going like this, three of them in a row, and we were shaking the camera, and it looks like they're running. It's actually incredible.
Jack, Kate, and Charlie were fleeing from the cockpit and the thing. And he wanted to have like a close-up of their face where they were like horrified and being chased, but it's very difficult, obviously, particularly in the jungle and the mud, where to keep them in focus, where they're running, and be able to have a really tight shot. So what he did, the camera came in really close, and we got a close-up of their face, and he had them running in place.
and like screaming and running and really looking like they were like screaming and looking over their shoulder and being horrified. And the camera was bouncing all around, so it gave the illusion that they were actually running when in fact they were running in place.
It looked almost as good as this.
This side, right here.
And shake the camera like little shakes, like that.
Okay, wait. You do this and I'll be behind you.
Okay, ready? Here we go.
And action. Cloud and rain.
Hey, guys, is this normal? You know, the day turning into night, the torrential rain, kind of end of the world type weather?
Foxy and Evie and I, while we were shooting all the scenes where Charlie and Kate and Jack go and try and get the transceiver from the cockpit, became very close because it was kind of a baptism of fire. You know, we spent about 7 days in the middle of the jungle with 3 firemen's hoses pointed directly at our faces on full blast to create this kind of torrential end of the world type weather.
That was awesome. Cut! That was so good. Fantastic. You guys gonna go again? Can we go tighter? Can we go tighter? Yeah. That was great.
Going tighter.
We connected very strongly. And then the weird thing that happened was that we then jumped into the day with the polar bear coming out of the trees, which was then the introduction of Maggie and Ian and Josh and Naveen.
You think that's what killed the pilot?
No. No, that's a tiny, teeny version compared to that.
Where the polar bear was a coconut grove. Totally surreal place. Thousands of coconut trees perfectly planted in a line, and everything underneath is just quiet and silent.
It was the first time that many of these actors had met, and certainly the first time they'd worked together. We all sort of got together and rehearsed the scene. It was fascinating watching these actors sort of meet each other and figure out kind of who they were, not just in terms of who their characters were, but kind of who they were to each other.
You found a gun on a U.S. Marshal. I believe you did. You knew it was there because you was the one he was taking back to the States.
At that point, we didn't know how it was going to develop. We didn't know what it was, where the character would go. For instance, now we know that the character is romantic, almost heroic in some ways. At that time, it seemed that his contribution that he could make to the group was his technical know-how.
I've sort of allowed the wave of the show to gauge how I figure out Kate and who she is and where she's coming from, because we are left in the dark so often. I don't know for sure exactly how old she is. They won't disclose anything. I don't know anything until we get that script, and that script says it in the script.
It was really hard for us in the beginning if you weren't shooting a lot of scenes because the storyline hadn't evolved to that yet, and it was really hard. And I didn't shoot my episode until a little over a month ago. So from July until November, I was a lunatic.
That can't be a polar bear.
It's a polar bear. Wait a minute. Polar bears don't usually live in the jungle.
Spot on.
I wanted to truly invest in this idea of this weird island of Dr. Moreau, this kind of foreboding sense that the island itself is a character in the show, you know, and it's always looming over your shoulder. I feel like the rules don't apply on this island, that in some way the island is able to emotionally tap into people and just draw emotions out of them that other times they might try and hold in, you know.
Where they are is something that we've talked about, and what the island is something we've talked about and have a very clear definition of in our heads. And, you know, JJ loves to have those very clear, big ideas and then be able to, you know, texture them in whatever way he sees fit. Or the books that they might be reading or the references in their discussions, you know, those things kind of come out in the moment very often as the thing is being conceived. But they all serve the greater mystery that we have clearly in our heads and yet want to maintain some artistic freedom in how you illuminate those ideas.
Okay, wide open space. You should check the radio, see if we're good.
We're not going to have any reception here. We're still blocked by the mountain.
Just check the damn radio!
If I just check, we might not have any juice left when we get there.
First day of work, I get there, and we're shooting the biggest scene, you know, dialogue-wise of the entire pilot for my guy. And so I'm like, great, okay, throwing right into the fire, here we go. And I had prepped without an accent. I'm doing the lines, and JJ came up to me about halfway through the day, and he's like, it's good, what you're doing is good, but it sounds like you're trying to speak without an accent. And I was like, yeah, of course I am, you know? Is it working? And he's like, no, you don't speak without an accent. That was before we hired you. You're Southern, let it ride. And that just set me free.
Originally, the polar bear, we really weren't going to see too much of, and Sawyer was going to shoot it, and then we would see it laying there. And the effects guys put a bladder in it, so, you know, we sort of see his last breath take, and then he would die. And the issue was, you know, where'd you get the gun? And then JJ wanted the polar bear to chase him, but the polar bear didn't really move, and he wasn't really animatronic, and we talked about bear suits, and well, pretty soon we thought, well, we'll just do high grass, and JJ's going, yeah, we could get tufts of grass coming up, so we've got tufts of grass coming out of air rams as the bear is coming through the high grass.
When they first said they wanted to have a polar bear, they said, can you do a CGI polar bear? And we said, sure we can, you know, but I guess maybe hanging on to the reality rules, JJ did not want to do a CGI polar bear. He wanted to have little snippets and pieces of fur moving through, or legs moving, and they built a puppet. You know, they were saying, well, someone's just going to run through the jungle, and we were just saying, well, who's going to do that? And in the middle of the production meeting, I just found myself raising my hand, and next thing I know, they strapped on polar bear chaps, and we went over to this little dense green area, and I was hopping through the jungle trying to mimic a four-legged run, because all we were going to see was two legs, and I was the polar bear running through the jungle.
And then JJ decided that the bear should, like, attack, so we tried launching him out of an air ramp.
And cut. We're going again real fast. Let's go again right away.
It didn't work.
Kevin Blank said to me, we're going to make the polar bear jump, computer graphic shot. I said, there's not going to be, I promise you, there will not be a computer polar bear in this show. And sure enough, there is. Because once we did the jump to the polar bear, you know, a number of times, which, by the way, as silly as they were, worked fine. But because you can freeze frame things now, they actually aired in the early commercials on ABC. They aired the footage as shot, and you see the polar bear jump. And when you freeze frame it, it is absolutely the dumbest thing you've ever seen. I mean, it is ridiculous. It's a stupid, goofy, Muppet-looking thing. Just like it could not be less scary. I mean, it's embarrassing. So Kevin Blank showed me that someone had not only seen that on TV, but had freeze framed it and posted it on the internet, which made the show laughable before it even aired. And he said, I think we can do better than that. And he actually ended up doing, if you freeze frame the DVD, you can see those few frames of the polar bear jumping, and it looks really scary. And that's because we didn't use that big, fluffy polar bear. It was all Kevin Blank.
My note to the artist, which is John Teska at Eden Effects, was more grass, just a little bit of bear. But it looked so good that I was really compelled to show it to JJ, and he seemed to respond to it. And then we went through different versions of, like, how much bear do we see? Do we want to telegraph what we are really seeing at that moment? Because he wanted the line of, this is a polar bear, to land dramatically, and you don't want to, have several moments of a polar bear leading to that, because that would diminish that moment. And but ultimately, he seemed to buy off on what we were doing.
Of the many outstanding qualities of Kevin Blank, our visual effects supervisor, one of them is spontaneity and the ability to think on his feet. We came up with a shot here today of this blue screen shot that would allow us to composite our characters climbing the mountain into that rock face way over there. And so we're doing it, even though, typically you'd want to spend a lot of time planning this and prepping it. We just thought, that's cool, and we're doing it. And that's what this crew is. It's nutty and incredibly talented.
When
When we were shooting the pilot, my part of it only took place here, and you know, I got to meet finally the rest of the cast, and we were all there together, and we got here and saw the plane on the beach, and it was just, you know, like, oh my God, like, this is astounding. Oh, this is really real.
Today we are going to learn how to run in the sand in stilettos, which these are very special stilettos. These could kill a man.
Stop! I'm a lifeguard. I'm licensed.
We had 5 days to shoot the opening sequence on the beach. The plane, though it crashed, was sort of a dying monster, that it was still very much alive.
I had never seen such an elaborate set. It was easy to transport myself to actually being in that situation. I was awestruck by it.
The thing was choreographed so that if you were looking down at the plane, you sort of tracked along each side of the plane until you made a full circle by the time the wing crashed.
It's a real plane that they've made to look like this. Everything was real. Every explosion happened.
On the bottom right-hand corner, I'm the guy that gets thrown back.
The wing, when that dropped, it dropped. We had one go at that.
Move! Get her up! Get her out of there! The wing!
You know, there's engines on fire and people screaming, and there's smoke everywhere and stuff falling and so much stuff happening. You really got to be on your game.
Okay, good. Cut.
From the beginning, JJ wanted the show to look very real, very cinematic. And that's a challenge in some ways, because sometimes it's harder to make something look real and unlit and, you know, almost documentary.
We came up with this idea that there would be someone who was trapped by a piece of the landing gear and allowed Jack to sort of be a hero and come and sort of save the guy. But it set up a few characters, you know, in a situation near the engine. You sort of think it's just about Jack being the hero, but what it really is about is setting up this giant engine. And as soon as you see the engine going, you sort of know that someone's going to get sucked in.
We're going to test our rig for camera before camera and everybody watches it, and we rehearsed this the other day, and now we're going to just test it, make sure everything's still ready to go, because sometimes it changes day to day. And he's going to run into the shot, and in the script somebody's yelling to him to stop, and he stops right in front of the engine, and the engine spools up and sucks him in.
This is the jet engine that I'm going to get sucked into today. And basically what we have here is a ratchet system. I got a harness on underneath here, and you kind of see it here. And just hooked me up in the middle of my back, and through there, over there. Dane and Jake are running the system. Everything should be fine.
We'll actually remove this entire piece right here and rebuild this engine entirely in CG and blow that up.
When the guy got sucked into the engine and stuff like that, that was pretty wild. I was pretty amazed that we were doing a television show and that stuff was being involved in it. But at the time, I didn't know Locke's story. I didn't know then that I had been confined to a wheelchair. So they were holding everything pretty close to the vest. So when I ran over and helped, I wasn't aware that a moment ago I had been paraplegic.
One of the things that I wanted to do was not have it be gruesome. You know, I wanted to have it be scary and shocking, but I didn't want people to get disgusted by it. So I wanted there to be no red at all, so that the plane never had any red on the logo. No one wore any red clothes, because once it became a bloody mess, which, you know, was something that is probably more realistic. Once it looked like a massacre, it just, to me, would just be untenable and people would tune out. So I wanted it to be shocking when you saw blood, so that when the guy gets pulled out from under the landing gear and you see the blood in his leg, you have a reaction to that blood. If we had been realistic and sort of had as much blood everywhere as there probably would have been, seeing that blood on his leg would have had no effect.
The opening 22-minute first act of that crash sequence, the way that I work as an editor is I try to work empathetically. I try to place myself in the position of the character and then like imagine what the character's feeling and then try to work from that. So like, how do I best communicate what this character is emotionally experiencing. The footage from that crash was so harrowing. It used to bring me to tears sometimes when I was working on it. It felt so intense.
I mean, when it came in, we were just blown away. I mean, we were also proud of it because, you know, to do a pilot like that and be the studio that was involved in that and the network, it was just like, look at this piece of work. I mean, it's just a devastating movie.
It felt like a film. You know, I'd kind of been immersed in the film industry for so long that I got confused and thought that we were making a film, and the cinematic kind of scope of it. You know, I thought at some point ABC were probably going to say, let's try and release this at the cinema and turn it into a feature film. It was that grand in its scale and that ambitious.
I mean, my big point to him was like, I think there's got to be some element that is comfortable, something that represents home to these people, but surrounded completely by this very esoteric, weird, strange, uncomfortable sound. And I was trying to think of what instruments can we use, because we do this live, there's live orchestra, and I wanted to kind of set up a very different sound for this show. I just didn't want it to be, okay, I'm scoring another show and it's going to have that sound to it. I wanted it to be really different. So I started thinking about, okay, what's our ensemble going to be? And the strings, we knew we wanted a string section, because strings are really versatile in that you can make people feel really like, it can be tender, it can be beautiful, or they can be just horrifying and scary. So those are great tools to have. What do we surround that with? And we thought, okay, how about just bizarre percussion, you know? And the first thought was like, okay, they're in a jungle, so jungle. But it was like, no, we don't want jungle percussion. We want stuff that's like bizarre. So what we did was we shipped home sections of the airplane.
While shooting, JJ had specifically said we should save some pieces of the plane and bring it back so Michael can use it for scoring. At the tail end of production, I kind of went through the wreckage and picked out some good pieces as far as wreckage goes. We shipped it out in a big crate, and when we got back to the scoring stage, Michael strung it up and used it for a lot of the percussion.
We used that on the show, and in the percussion booth, the guy plays the airplane pieces. We have an instrument called the angklung, which is normally a wooden instrument, but we have one that is made of metal. So we're using that. That has a very unique sound to it. We're using a piano board that was ripped out of a piano. So it's just basically the guts of a piano and just banging on all kinds of weird, just different things. And the idea is to use these kind of conventional instruments in ways that you don't normally use these instruments.
Going out to look for the cockpit, see if we can find a transceiver.
Yeah, this is genius. Going into the jungle after that sound last night. The thing that moved those trees.
The monster thing was dealt with a lot of sophistication. It wasn't this kind of, you know, boogeyman. It was something that was genuinely scary.
Emily?
Did anybody see that?
Yeah. Unfortunately. When Damon and I came up with this show, the reason we ended the first act with the monster is we just wanted to say, like, up front, this is the kind of show it is.
We really needed that external force that was so overwhelming and so seemingly unbeatable for our characters, that they could come together in the face of it, that it was a challenge and a threat that would force them to bond where they wouldn't have bonded otherwise.
What we're doing here is we're photographing some bamboo treetops in front of a blue screen, and we're going to shoot different size pieces so that we can randomly and arbitrarily just sort of build a jungle of controlled pieces that break and blow in the wind and through different lighting conditions, manufacture the jungle that they're looking at, and then when this large thing is moving through the jungle, we can use our pieces that are breaking and snapping to sort of create the path of this thing.
Action.
Hey, how's it going? Crazy day, huh? We got chicken and lasagna.
And cut. Was that good for you guys?
Cut.
I believe that's a wrap. Woo! Yeah. Terrio Quinn and Jorge Garcia, geniuses both. Thank you so much.
The last day, the last scene, the last day of the shoot of the pilot, as soon as he said cut, and that was it, that was a wrap, I ran down to the beach and just dove into the water. A little symbolic moment of triumph.
It wasn't the easiest shoot in the world. The weather was tricky at times, but the crew has been amazing. The cast has been amazing. The attitude has been amazing. So it's fully realized. The script, it's unbelievable. It's every writer's dream.
We're burning the shorts. We had a lot of bad weather, sort of on and off, but it was almost always blamed on my shorts.
We decided that JJ's shorts were the curse. I will tell you, God love JJ, but they were the ugliest pair of shorts. They became disposable.
I stopped wearing them about halfway through the shoot, and we had good weather the rest of the time. We had the blessings at the beginning of the shoot. This is a reverse blessing. This is to the gods for such a successful shoot. The burning of my hideous shorts. On the last day of shooting, we, in a pretty somber ceremony, burned the shorts and put to rest the bad weather demons. You guys, thank you so much. You're the greatest crew. I cannot believe how amazing you guys were. Thank you so much. I'm gonna miss all of you guys. Thank you.
We wrapped. It was a good cast, and we're gonna be back. Believe that.
I don't think I'll really feel like it's over until I'm back in LA and, 2 or 3 days of sleeping have gone by and I realise that I don't have to get up and do anything. But then, if the show goes, then we'll be back into the swing of things pretty quickly.
Made a lot of friends, definitely. And just, shooting in such a beautiful place with such an amazing set, which I'm very excited about. I'm just excited to see this as a finished piece too.
I've never done something so fulfilling as far as work is concerned. Just to work with this level of people and this cast, such a talented cast.
No, it's just been a very, very amazing experience. And the whole thing is a surprise because it started actually 3 months ago to the day when Damon met JJ. And it has happened incredibly quickly.
It's just the most amazing working experience I've ever had on every level. I'm very, very proud to be involved in it.